You know, back in the 1960s, while the entire world was glued to their TVs watching America's Apollo missions head to the moon, the Soviet Union was looking somewhere else entirely. They were focused on our other neighbor, Venus. And their plan? Well, it was basically a series of suicide missions, pouring billions of dollars into probes designed to do the impossible, land on another planet and send back pictures. But what they actually found was a vision of hell that completely staggered their scientists and changed everything we thought we knew about the solar system. And think about this. The Soviets racked up an incredible number of firsts on Venus. They were the first to hit it, the first to enter its atmosphere, the first to land on it, and the first to send back photos from the surface. So the big question is, after all that success, why did they just stop? And maybe more importantly, with all of our modern technology, why has no one else even tried to land there since? To really get it, you have to rewind to the Cold War. The space race was in full swing, and it was all about the US and the USSR trying to one-up each other to prove who had the technological edge. Now, America focused on the moon. It was the obvious target, right? You can see it every night. But the Soviets, they aimed for Venus. The thinking was, if America can put a man on the moon, we'll go one step further. We'll land in hell itself. At the time, Venus was a total mystery. On paper, it looked a lot like Earth's twin, about the same size, not that much closer to the sun, but it was completely wrapped in this thick blanket of clouds. No one had a clue what was underneath. For Soviet scientists, it was like this giant cosmic secret box. And they figured cracking it open, showing the world what was inside, would be an even bigger propaganda victory than landing on the plain old moon. I mean, what if they found oceans, jungles, or even life? That would have been game over. So they went all in. They didn't just plan one or two missions. No, they planned a massive series of 18 missions to Venus. The whole program was called Venera, which is just the Russian word for Venus. Their ambition was just enormous. But they were about to find out that the planet they were trying to conquer was not going to give up its secrets easily. Now, here's something interesting about the Soviets. They were super secretive. They wouldn't say a peep about a mission until it was a success, to avoid the embarrassment of failure. And in the beginning, yeah, there was a lot of failure. Their first few tries to even get to Venus were met with this silent, violent reality that they were just completely unprepared for. Just look at this string of bad luck. In '61, Venera 1, the first probe ever sent to another planet, just goes silent after a week. 4 years later, same thing happens to Venera 2. Then comes Venera 3. It actually makes it, becoming the first human-made object to touch the surface of another world, but its systems die right before it can phone home. It's not until 1967 with Venera 4 that they get just a tiny taste of success, right before the probe is completely obliterated. At first, the Soviets tried to spin it. They announced that Venera 4 had landed safely, but the truth was way more shocking. The probe, which they thought was built tough, had been completely flattened in midair. One of the scientists on the team famously described it as being crushed like a soda can. They had massively, totally underestimated the sheer power of Venus's atmosphere. The secret box was fighting back. Okay, so after having a bunch of your probes squashed like bugs, the Soviets had this huge realization. They weren't building a spaceship. They were building a deep-sea submarine, but for an ocean of air. The whole mission changed. It wasn't just about getting there anymore. The new goal was simply survive. So they went back to square one, and this time they decided to build a tank. And that brings us to Venera 7. I mean, this thing was an absolute beast. It was so over-engineered, so heavy and reinforced that they literally had to sacrifice the science. They pulled out instruments just to make more room for armor plating. Its whole purpose, its one and only job, was to somehow make it to the surface in one piece and just send a signal. That's it. Survive. But even a tank has a tough time landing on Venus. The descent was just brutal. The parachute tears, it slams into the surface at nearly 40 miles an hour. And to top it all off, it lands and tumbles, coming to rest upside down with its main antenna pointing at the dirt. It looked like another heartbreaking failure. But the scientists kept listening. And then they heard it. A tiny, faint signal. Against all odds, it had survived. And for 23 agonizing minutes, it transmitted data from the surface of another world. And what Venera 7 sent back was absolutely terrifying. The first piece of data was the temperature. The surface of Venus was a scorching 465 degrees Celsius. That's over 850 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt lead, and more than double the maximum temperature of your oven at home.
Then came the pressure reading. It was 90 times greater than the atmospheric pressure here on Earth. To put that in perspective, that's the same amount of pressure you'd feel if you were 1 kilometer deep in the ocean. This was the colossal force that had been crushing their earlier probes like toys.
And the final piece of the puzzle came as the probe was falling. Scientists noticed a tiny shift in its radio frequency, the Doppler effect. And from that little shift, they figured out that something was pushing the probe sideways with incredible force. Turns out, Venus has hurricane-force winds whipping around at 360 kilometers an hour. It's just a completely violent world. So, all right, they had survived. They knew the conditions. Now it was time for the ultimate prize, to actually see it. The next phase of the Venera program was equipped with the one thing everyone on Earth was waiting for: cameras. The goal was to finally, once and for all, open the secret box and see the surface of this alien inferno. And on October 22nd, 1975, Venera 9 did something that was pure science fiction just a few years before. It sent back the very first photograph ever taken from the surface of another planet. And in that moment, Venus stopped being a bright star in the sky and became a real place. It wasn't sand dunes or anything like that. It was a grim, alien landscape of sharp, broken rocks, all under this hazy, oppressive orange sky. But this incredible triumph was followed by the most absurdly frustrating problem you can imagine. These multi-million-dollar probes, engineered to survive hell itself, were repeatedly defeated by a tiny piece of metal: the lens cap. On Venera 9 and 10, only one of the two lens caps came off. Then on Venera 11 and 12, both probes landed perfectly, survived for over an hour and a half, but neither of their lens caps would open. They sent back a ton of amazing data, but not a single picture.
But the most infamous story has to be Venera 14. It lands, it successfully pops off the lens cap, which lands right on the ground in front of the camera. Then, the probe deploys this little spring-loaded arm to pop out and test how hard the Venusian soil is. Well, the arm deploys perfectly and lands directly on top of the lens cap and had just ejected. So, the one and only soil hardness test from Venera 14 gave us a perfect measurement of the hardness of its own lens cap. You just can't make this stuff up. After all the frustrations and successes with the landers, the Soviets made one last strategic pivot. Landing was just incredibly difficult, and the probes only survived for a short time anyway. So for their final missions, they decided to stay up in the sky and just map the entire hidden world from above. So Venera 15 and 16 were orbiters, not landers. And since no regular camera could ever see through Venus's permanent cloud cover, they were equipped with a powerful radar system. For 8 solid months, these probes just circled the planet, using that radar to pierce the clouds and methodically create the first ever complete, detailed map of Venus's northern hemisphere. And they revealed these massive volcanoes and continent-sized highlands that no one even knew existed. So when you look back on it all, 2 decades of work, dozens of missions, countless failures, and historic triumphs. What was the real legacy of this relentless Soviet pursuit of Venus? What did this journey to hell actually teach us? The Venera program pretty much single-handedly rewrote our understanding of how planets work. It revealed that crushing atmosphere, the runaway greenhouse effect from a sky full of carbon dioxide, and the shocking fact that the clouds are made of sulfuric acid. They measured the lead-melting temperatures, they saw the volcanic rocks, they clocked the super hurricane winds, and they even detected the sound of thunder on another world. For a long time, people called Venus the Soviet planet, and for good reason. They had completely unveiled its secrets. In the end, the Soviets set out to find Earth's twin, hoping for a massive propaganda victory. Instead, through just incredible perseverance, they revealed a vision of hell. After spending billions and achieving so many historic firsts, all they really did was prove that Venus was the most inhospitable place you could possibly imagine. Which brings us right back to our original question. After they showed us what's really there, why has no one dared to land there ever since?